So, as most of you know, if you've been around this church at all, and you've heard me talk about anything for any length of time, food will come up. Uh, and I figured today's a safe Sunday to talk about food. Usually I don't try to talk about food because it seems kind of rude, right? I mean, it seems rude to talk about food and we're not going to feed you. But today we're going to feed you, so today I can talk about food. That's the logic. That's how that goes. Those are the rules that I just made up. All right, so I do like to, and it's good that I like food because I also like to cook. And when you're the middle child of three children of a single mother, you get lots of opportunities to learn how to cook growing up. When I got to college, I already knew how to do my laundry and I already knew how to cook a basic meal and all that sort of stuff. That was just sort of survival skills in our house as we were growing. So I left my home able to brown hamburger and cook chicken and do all those basic tasks, which was really handy, and it's really especially handy when you fall in love and marry a woman who does not know how to cook at all. But to be fair to her, it also had a pretty decent advantage to me because I could cook, but I also happen to be a bit of a picky eater. And when you're the one doing cooking, you're the one that gets to decide what you eat. So it actually worked out pretty well. And I think it probably took a few years of our marriage to figure out that that's more what I was covering for. And it took her that long to figure out, why do we have spaghetti every week? Right? And like, because I like it and I know how to make it. But but the last few years, it's one of those things that I've wanted to do more of, and and learned to embrace and try to learn how to do new things. And I've gotten definitely more adventurous. When you have kids, you realize one of the things there's a lot of things you want to pass off to your children, but one of the things you don't want to pass off to them is also being a picky eater. So when we had kids, I'm like, I got to expand my repertoire. I got to learn how to do new stuff. So not only meant new recipes, but also new techniques and things like that. A while ago, a couple of years ago, I decided I really wanted to get better at chicken and try new ways to do chicken because chicken is everywhere. And I had seen on TV a chef on TV once take a chicken and then I swear make four cuts with a knife, and to the point where it just laid flat, right? It was a whole chicken, but he made four cuts. He seemed like magic. He made four cuts knife, and it just laid flat. And then he cooked it that way, and I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting way to cook a whole chicken. And I'm like trying to remember how he did it, and I'm like, I'm a smart guy. I was an engineer before I was a pastor. Like, I can figure this out. So I remembered what I remembered from him doing it, and I got my knife out, and I'm looking at this chicken, and I'm like, okay, man, we're gonna get through this. Well, I am. You're not. And I had a couple of them I wanted to do, and so I started on the first one and what I can best remember him doing it, and I just make a mess out of it. I mean, it was bad. I mean, I was not intending to make chicken nuggets, but that's sort of what we ended up with. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And I'm like, I need some help. I'm going to need some directions here. And thankfully, we live in the future, and we have a thing called YouTube. And YouTube is fantastic if you want to learn how to do something. But first I had to figure out what it is that I was asking to learn how to do, because all I knew is I wanted to make my chicken lay flat. I was sure there must be a name for, that process, but I didn't know what it was. So first you have to spend 10 minutes Googling to figure out what it is you're supposed to Google, right? And once I figured it out, what I really actually wanted to do is I wanted to spatchcock my chicken, which doesn't sound like a sentence you should say in a church, but it's okay. And that is the process of basically kind of dismantling it while leaving it in place so that it lays flat. And I pull up the YouTube video, and there's this gal teaching people how to do it. Now, she is not a professional chef. She doesn't just make 6 marks with a knife and it magically falls open. And the first thing I notice when I turn on the video is she actually doesn't have a knife in her hand. She has a pair of scissors. And she starts by cutting the bird open with a pair of scissors. And I'm like, oh, I have kitchen scissors. And so I just follow along, and she makes a couple of mistakes in the video and then shows me what she did and shows me how to not make those mistakes. And within 20 minutes, I've got this perfectly flat chicken that was then, of course, loaded onto the Traeger and smoked to perfection, because that part I knew how to do. And it was delicious. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And a couple weeks later, when I wanted to do it again, I went back and watched the video again, and I learned from her experience. And I'm like, okay, that's how you do it. And now I can do it pretty okay, but I do have that video bookmarked in case I need it. It's all well and good sometimes to know that there's something that can be done, It's all well and good to have some vague idea of what it is, but it's something else entirely when you get to learn from and get exposed to somebody else's experience. What I needed, since I had no experience of this on my own, what I needed was to borrow somebody else's experience. I needed somebody else who already knew what they were doing to show me how to do it. And it was far easier for me to learn how to do it by watching somebody do it on YouTube than it probably would have even been reading instructions, right? Of course, I'm a guy, I don't read instructions anyway. But there's just something about watching somebody do it. There's something about learning from somebody else's experience, watching them accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish, learn the thing you want to learn. Learning from others' experience, as it turns out, is something that human beings have been doing for a while, because before we actually did have cookbooks and could write things down and all that sort of stuff, the way that we learned is we learned by watching others and learning from others who knew better how to do something than we did. If we want to learn the important things in life, oftentimes the best way to do it is to listen to somebody and be around somebody who knows what it is that you are trying to know. That is basically the crutch of the story today. So in today's story, we're in the book of Acts, so we've moved forward in our timeline. So we're in Jesus' time before. As for those of you who haven't been around, we've been on this series all summer called Road Trip, where we've basically been doing different stories in the Bible that happen by the side of the road and really have very little connection other than that. So today we find ourselves in the book of Acts. So this is after Jesus' death and resurrection. He's ascended into heaven. The disciples are now the ones in charge of this thing that Jesus started. They're the ones in charge of the mission. They're the ones in charge and responsible to go and share this good news message that they heard. And we're here early in the book of Acts, and we're hearing those early efforts that the disciples have stepping out to go and do that thing that Jesus called them to do. Because right at the beginning of this book, in his last interaction with the disciples on earth, Jesus said, "Go and be my witnesses to the ends of the earth." So in today's story, we have Philip following that call in going to talk to somebody who happens to be riding a chariot down the side of the road. Now, this is an interesting story for a lot of reasons. One is we don't know a lot about this guy. We don't get his name. We know he is basically the servant of the queen, which, even though he is a servant, makes him pretty high in status at the time. We know he's important, and we know he's probably fairly wealthy, or at least has access to wealth, because he's riding in a chariot, which, if you think about like Ben-Hur and stuff like that, you may be thinking like everybody rode around in chariots, but that was not the truth. Somebody riding in a chariot in Jesus' day would be like something akin to somebody riding around in like a Bentley or a Rolls Royce today. It was that uncommon. Most people, if you had to go somewhere, walked. 95% of people walked wherever they went. They didn't have access to any other way of transporting themselves. When Mary and Joseph are traveling, they're actually traveling with a donkey, which actually is pretty uncommon even for the time. But traveling in the donkey is like driving around in like your 75 Ford pickup truck. Right? Yeah, it can get you where you need to go, but mostly its utility isn't that it's able to carry stuff and haul stuff and do hard work, right? That's the purpose of the donkey. If you're in a chariot, that chariot exists for no other reason than to carry important people around. So we know this person's important. We also know he's apparently not in much of a hurry because chariots actually move fairly quickly, and Philip on foot is able to not only catch up to him, but have a conversation. I really want to know how that worked. Right? You do really kind of wonder, did he have to like jog alongside? And he's like, "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" Or did they slow down? I don't know how it worked, but somehow he manages to catch the attention of this guy who was sitting there. And then the last little detail we have about him is he's reading, which means not only, one, he can read, which is a pretty big deal at a time when most people couldn't, and he had a written copy of the scripture. He had a written copy of Isaiah. Most people didn't have that. You'd be lucky if an entire village got together and had a written copy of something. So we know Philip, this person who's really kind of coming out of nowhere, ends up talking with this person who's obviously rich and important and powerful. And he asks him this really interesting question. "I hear what you're reading. Do you know what it means?" And the eunuch, who has nothing to lose, because he's already got all the status and power anyway, and isn't willing to, and so doesn't mind humbling himself a little bit, says, "Well, how can I understand it if no one explains it to me?" What he doesn't know, he needs Philip because Philip's had the experience. because the passage he's reading is a prophecy we understand to be about Jesus, and Philip just spent a lot of time with him. So Philip comes in, he says, well, let me tell you what I know, let me tell you what I've experienced, let me tell you what my life has been like for these last few years. Let me give you this good news message that I have and have to share. The eunuch gets to learn something new and important. The eunuch gets to learn about God's grace and God's love and God's forgiveness and the peace that comes with all of that. The eunuch gets to learn all of that quite simply because he's willing to ask for directions. And Philip is there, and Philip is willing to share of his experience because he wants other people to know. He wants this person to know that he is loved, not loved because he's important and rich and powerful, loved because of who God is and what Jesus came to do. The eunuch gets to learn something. Philip gets to share something. Philip gets to be the teacher, though, in this situation. He's clearly the poorer and least powerful of the two because the eunuch is able to ask directions. He needs somebody with experience to show them and tell him what this thing really means. I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One is, if you've noticed, if you've hung around here for a while, I like to talk about the Bible, and I like to talk about what's going on with the Bible and give the context of it and that sort of thing. And part of the reason that we do that and we spend time every Sunday doing that is that it is not always immediately obvious what the Bible means, right? This guy is reading from the Bible, and yet it's not immediately obvious to him what this means and what this is a prophecy of. Philip, who has the experience and the knowledge, needs to share what he knows so that the eunuch can know too. We shouldn't be surprised 2,000 years later that sometimes we have questions about what it is that the Bible actually means and what are these passages actually trying to say to us, and that we need to gather and gain the wisdom of others around us, not just from me. I know a little bit, but if you add up everything that's known in this space right now, it's probably a whole lot. But sometimes we need that help to figure out what it is that God intends. And that's okay, and in fact, that's how God intends it to work. We don't need to know everything. Everything isn't supposed to be immediately obvious to us. There is this thing in our faith we call mystery, and that mystery we have to engage with. That's part of the process. I wanted to talk about this passage today because I knew we were going to be doing this after VBS. And for me, this passage really talks to why it is that we do this thing, why it is that we invest so much of our time and our energy every summer into putting on this event for all of these kids to come to, why it is that we spend all this time and money and effort to put together this experience that we hope is really good, why I see amazing people running around for months and 2 months prior building amazing styrofoam cactuses, which were amazing, and all the other things that get done. And I watch the youth, I watch the music people get all their stuff done, and the story people get all their stuff done, and the imagination station people get all their stuff done. And then I get to be here on the best day, which is when we sample the snacks. And you find out we're serving the kids green Twinkies. Because why not? Because they look like cactuses. That's why. Why would you not? And all this work and all this effort goes in, one, yes, because it's a good time, and two, because we like to do this stuff. But the actual purpose, the actual reason behind it is actually pretty simple. My hope, and I think the hope of everyone who gathers here, is that these kids who come and get loved on for a week, who come and get to watch adults putting time and energy and effort into them, helping them know and understand that they are worth that time and energy and effort, watching our people who do games outside in almost triple-degree heat stay out there all day so that the kids can have fun outside, and then come inside and learn, not only learn the stories, which are important, but more importantly, learn that they are loved. Learn that there's a group of people out there who care about them. Even though sometimes the kids who gather with us we've never met. We will only meet when they first enter the door. We still invest our time and energy and effort into them every bit as much as the one that we've had known since the day they were born. Because there's one thing that's in common that all those kids share, because it's the thing that we all share. We are all God's children, and we are all made in God's image. And we're all worthy of love. And we all need, from time to time, for somebody to remind us of that and show it to us. We have one hope, and one simple hope, if nothing else, of the time the kids say come to be with us, is that they leave there knowing that there's a group of people that cared about them and loved them and was willing to invest time and energy and effort into them because they're worth it and they deserve it. Not because they're special and not because they're 100% perfect all the time, that we take them as they come, even when they occasionally cry and do things they're not supposed to do, not looking at anybody in particular. But not even despite of those things, but just because of who they are, we are here for them. Because that's how we believe God is here for us. And we hope nothing more they take that away. That becomes something that gets stuck in their head every bit as much as the VBS songs get stuck into their head. That there is a God of the whole universe and that God loves them. And there is a place that you can go to experience that love and that peace. And there's a place to go where there are people, even people you may not even known before, whose names you don't know, care about and you love you. Because that's what we, as the church, as the embodiment of Christ's hands and feet, are called to do. So I love this week every year. I love it not just because it's fun and not just because I really don't actually have to do much other than walk around and smile. Everyone else does the hard work. And not just because of the music, even though I love the music, and it's not just because of the story because I love the story, and it's not just because of the snack, though I love the snack. It's because we get to be here, we get to see these kids, we get to watch them shine, we get to watch them be loved, we get to watch them love each other. And we got to get to watch them and be around them as they learn something critically important. And it's the thing that we are here to remember today. And that thing is that we are made in God's image and we are God's beloved children. And if you need somebody with a little bit more experience to remind you of it, we are happy to do that for you this morning. And just also to remind ourselves that God has been in this business for a very long time. There are millions of billions of people who have gone through this world that God has loved on, and God is loving on us the same way. So let us celebrate our kids. Let us celebrate all we've done. Let's celebrate the excitement of the time. Let's eat some good food in a minute here. Let us gather together and smile and reminisce with people we've maybe not seen for a while. But let's also remember why it is that we are here. We are here because we were loved first. We were here because we were loved in such a way that we could never repay, and nor are we called to repay it. We are only called to take and embrace the love we are offered and share it with any and everybody we find along our path. And sometimes the one we find are 140 amazing little kids, and we are blessed to be with them. Amen.